Chapter 1456, The Consecrated One. After returning from the southwest region, Zhang Yi only felt slightly exhausted physically and mentally. After all, he had gone through a tough battle and needed to take a good rest. However, after returning to Tianhai City, all these problems were no longer a problem. No matter how cold and cruel the outside world was, his shelter was still warm and cozy in all seasons. Lying on the soft big bed, enjoying the four-handed bullet of the duo of Zhou Qi and Yang Xia, soothing every muscle in his body, this feeling made him unusually intoxicated. For the next few days' time, he didn't bother with other events, only thinking about enjoying his life. However, during this period, Zhu Jing still gave him a communication call, asking him about what happened in the southwest region. Zhang Yi did not hide too many things and recounted the general course of events with him. Zhu Jing was a bit sultry after hearing this. Zhang Yi, we're all old friends, and you're now the #1 combatant in the Jiangnan region. When you encountered such a thing, why didn't you inform me? Zhang Yi smiled. I don't know what kind of trouble you guys would cause if you showed up in the southwest region's territory. Don't forget that the 6 regions cannot interfere with each other. There was another sentence he didn't say, and that was also his truest thought. Today's Jiangnan region, in the midst of direct action, the only help it could offer him was intelligence, and the Reaper of Love. As for combat power? Sorry, any more mutants below Epsilon would be meaningless to him. Zhang Yi, who had now been promoted to the Black Chariot level, could easily kill a large number of captain-level Inhumans in seconds. I won't mention these, but... Did you get the source of God there? Mentioning this, Zhu Zheng's tone became a bit eager. Zhang Yi's mouth curved even more. What are you thinking about? There are several forces involved this time, and we're facing the powerful existence of the underground civilization directly. Even the Reaper of Love has come out. Do you think I still have a chance to get the source of God? Zhu Jing sighed lightly. That's true, this kind of thing isn't a cabbage after all. This conversation Zhu Jing didn't get much useful information. He slowly closed the communicator, leaning back in his chair with a somewhat serious gaze. The whitened daylight outside the window shone feebly on his face, pulling his shadow across the ground. He supported his chin with both hands, his expression as unchanging as black iron, making it unclear what he was thinking inside. The secretary at the side, Lan Xinchen, walked over and said softly, Zhang Yi's concealment from you is becoming more and more obvious. Zhu Jing glanced at him. If you had his strength, you could be so arrogant too. Lan Xinchen's tone stagnated, but Zhu Jing let out a long sigh. There's no way around it. Who made him the reliance of the Jiangnan region now? After the Great Mutation era came, this world became a world dominated by mutants. The only Reaper of Love that we can rely on is actually highly unstable and cannot be used at will. This was something Lan Xinchen could not deny. Let alone Epsilon. Back then, just a group of mutants led by Gao Changkong had almost killed the Combat Command Center and exterminated Zhu Zheng, the supreme commander of the Jiangnan region. We need to have our own Epsilon. Lan Xinchen said in a grave tone. Zhu Jing slightly raised the corner of his mouth. He stood up from his chair. Let's go to the experiment center. The two of them went downstairs. The research department that Li Lingxue was in charge of was located below the Combat Command Center, a super-military institution located 200 meters underground. Zhu Jing and Lan Xinchen rode the special elevator all the way down to the experiment center. It was a huge white building, fantastic like a scene from a sci-fi movie, where a mutant in a black combat suit stood guard. The combat uniforms on them were something Zhang Yi had never seen before. A brand new investigation team. The experimenters inside were already surprised by Zhu Zheng's arrival, and immediately a female researcher with shoulder-length hair came over to meet them. Commander. Zhu Zheng nodded. How is the experiment progressing? The female researcher sidestepped to make way. It is proceeding in an orderly manner according to the original plan. According to the current speed, it is expected that the experimental body breakthrough will be completed at experiment 238. Zhu Jing followed her all the way forward through the narrow white corridor. Along the way, although on the surface nothing was seen, in reality, the internal intelligence system had already recognized their identities multiple times. Once anything was found to be wrong, it would attract powerful organs to attack them. Eventually, they arrived inside an incomparably huge laboratory. The head of the research department, Li Lingxue, was dressed in a white lab coat and stood in front of the glass window with a serious gaze, raising her head to gaze ahead. The surrounding dozen of researchers were busy operating the test benches and instrumentation in their hands. Li Lingxue looked ahead, her eyes focused and mesmerized, as if she was looking at the most beautiful masterpiece of her life. Zhu Jing slowly walked over with his hands behind his back and stood beside her, looking at the huge transparent container with exclaiming eyes. "How's that? She's a very good experiment, isn't she?" Li Lingxue only noticed Zhu Jing's arrival at this time, and she simply said indifferently, "She is perfect in herself. And we are just discovering the potential within her genes. It's hard to imagine how strong she would be right now if we were cultivating the very first parent." Zhu Jing was also somewhat emotional. He was still thinking about what would have happened today if, back then, Yuan Kongyue had not died at the hands of Zhang Yi. But that unstable religious head was indeed not as easy to control as the half-baked product in front of them that had been replicated with ice soul. In front of their eyes was a huge apparatus over 10 meters high, and in the middle of the transparent cylindrical glass vessel, there was a naked young girl silently suspended. Her long hair was like seaweed floating in the green liquid, almost like a white sea fish sealed in a can of seafood. And connected to the transparent can were densely packed pipes. Li Lingxue suddenly waved her hand towards the side and decisively shouted, "Start." All the experimenters immediately began to frantically operate the equipment at hand. Rumble. On both sides of the lab, thick metal plates began to slowly rise, revealing dozens of smaller, transparent vessels behind them. They were a few sizes smaller than Zhuyu's vessels, but they all invariably had a naked human in them, soaked in green liquid. They were male and female, old and young, but without exception they were in an unconscious state. With a wave of Li Lingxue's big hand, poof! A human amongst a transparent vessel shattered into bloody foam on the spot. The blood plasma completely drenched the green liquid, mixing it into an unnameable color. Poof! Pft! Pft! Poof! Almost in an instant, all the humans amongst the transparent vessels were all obliterated in this form. Behind Zhuyu, the bloated machine extended dozens of tubes, like the tentacles of an octopus, and began to suck the material in the vessel in large gulps, and finally injected it into the container where Zhuyu was. Chapter 1457, Power Comes from People. Watching that monster-like machine begin to operate, conducting the substance obtained from draining dozens of people into the vessel Zhu was in, Zhu Zheng's face became excited. This is truly a great masterpiece, isn't it? Taking countless bottom feeders to offer up a supreme being. This is too logical for a living species. Moreover, compared to killing mutants and then absorbing their origin. Or this means of juicing them alive has a higher conversion rate. This is simply awesome. Zhu Zheng's smile gradually perverted, his eyes carrying a touch of paranoid madness. It won't be long before I will also have my own epsilon. 2 days later, Yang Xinxin found Zhang Yi and provided him with the first piece of deciphered information. I have finished organizing the biography of King Geezer, and this intelligence, brother, will definitely be of great interest to you. Yang Xinxin was wearing a black Lolita outfit, sitting beside Zhang Yi in a well-behaved manner, smiling as she pressed her small white hand on his shoulder, looking at him with a smiling face. Zhang Yi, dressed in his home leisure attire, sat cross-legged on the sofa and opened the information transmitted by Yang Xinxin with interest. Looking at the information in front of him, his eyes soon filled with a bright light, along with a deep shock. the feeling that the clouds of suspicion that had been hanging over his heart for a long time were dispersing little by little made his heart feel free. Interesting, really interesting. According to the tale of King Geezer, back then, King Geezer and Master Lotus Sang had had many conversations that were dedicated to the power of tantric faith, as well as the mutants. The so-called reincarnation was actually an ability of King Geezer. It is not really reincarnation, but a belief in choosing the right successor amongst future generations through tantric faith. This also explains why Jugo and Luozhuo were able to merge in the end, both exerting the power of tantric faith. As for the duel with Prince Anlet, the Undertaker said that he was a Lotus Master, presumably due to the fact that back then, Master Lotus helped King Geezer suppress the Demon Kingdom. The implication of this statement was that Zhang Yi was the ideal helper for his destiny. If one is a top-notch Nian ability user, they can indeed pass on their beliefs to future generations through their bloodline or faith. Zhang Yi murmured. Yang Xinxin sat beside him with her legs bent, her small feet in black stockings swaying gently. The most interesting things recorded here, I think, are still about supernatural powers, in the 9-story Demon Tower. She helped Zhang Yi flip through the somewhat complicated information and found the relevant page, then pointed to the text on it for Zhang Yi to see. Among King Geezer and Master Lotus Sang's understanding, mutants are born from huge clans. The more clansmen there are, the stronger the collective beliefs that are born. This power will eventually converge on a single person, making him or her a child of destiny. She rolled her eyes and said, in the snowy region back then, the Demon Kingdom ruled the land and enslaved the people. King Geezer was born in response to this belief. He was born under the inspiration of this belief and possessed power strong enough to overthrow the Demon Kingdom. When Zhang Yi heard Yang Xinxin say this, he could not help but think about the mutants he had seen around him. But after the end of the world came, were people's beliefs strong enough to give birth to so many mutants? He shook his head. I don't understand mutants. Do I still not understand humans? Their beliefs would only be to keep themselves alive, not to pray for others to become stronger and then come and destroy them. This is fundamentally different from the chaotic ancient times. People are more rational and more selfish. Yang Xinxin smiled and nodded. Oh brother, I think so too. So, she reached out and pointed towards the 9-story Demon Tower. Amongst their description of the 9-story Demon Tower, it showed me some clues. Zhang Yi fixed his eyes on it. Among the information was King Geezer and Master Lotus Sang's description of the 9-story Demon Tower. Its birth was from the era of the Demon Kingdom. The High Priest of the Demon Kingdom, adhering to the will of the demons, ordered the construction of the tower and sacrificed it with blood and flesh. The highest level of sacrifice was humans with special talents. Blood was poured into them, musical instruments were made from their skin and bones to please the demon god, and they were killed in blood to show their sincerity to the demon god. In short, one sentence, the construction of each 9-story Demon Tower was accompanied by the deaths of countless people. Xinxin, what do you think? Zhang Yi asked. Yang Xinxin's gaze slowly became deeper, and the smile at the corner of her mouth became much thicker. My guess is the human heart. She stroked her chest, which was now slightly flat. Brother, do you still remember what Jugo said to you when we parted? Zhang Yi recalled that time and muttered, in this world, there has never been any reincarnation or reincarnation, much less the power of faith. What there is only the human heart. He came to a sudden realization. You mean to say that the so-called supernatural powers come from the power of the human heart? Yang Xinxin said, this argument would be somewhat metaphysical and difficult to explain. However, we can think of it this way, that the human body possesses some kind of special energy. Fallen on an individual, this power is very weak. Of course, since the base of human beings is so large, there will always be some special individuals who are born with stronger special energies. They are the born mutants. In the past, we considered them to be super ability users. Zhang Yi nodded, gradually realizing in his heart. Then, the 9-story Demon Tower, or the purple pyramid in the underground world that I once saw, are actually energy collectors. They exist for the purpose of obtaining this special energy from humans in large quantities. Therefore, bloody sacrifices need to be made to them to release the energy from the human body through killing. Some words were rationalized, and the truth of the matter was just revealed. Zhang Yi raised his head fiercely and looked at Yang Xinxin with some surprise and said, "This is why, after the coming of the end times, so many mutants would suddenly appear in this world. Because the more people who die, the special energy they possess will escape, thus creating a huge energy field. And others who absorb this power will become mutants. Moreover, as long as the end times continue, the more people die, and the higher the probability that the survivors will mutate, the stronger they will be." A mysterious smile appeared at the corner of Yang Xinxin's mouth. She hugged up her legs and sat on the sofa, looking sideways at Zhang Yi. "Ah, brother, you're very smart, and this explanation basically matches everything we've encountered so far. It's just that the truth of the matter shouldn't be that simple. We need more intelligence to be able to see the problem through." Chapter 1458, The Nacre Slate. The deeper the conversation with Yang Xinxin went, the more Zhang Yi felt a sense of awe towards supernatural powers and the emergence of the end times. Initially, he thought that everything was a chance event. However, as he understood the world more deeply, the ignorant side of his heart became wider and wider, and the sense of awe became uncontrollable. A great scholar once said, "The cognitive side of mankind is like a circle. Inside the circle is the sphere of understanding, and outside the circle is its unknown territory." So when a person learned more knowledge, the more he would realize his ignorance. Zhang Yi held his own chin, associating it with what he had experienced before, and snapped into a bold conjecture. The ancient civilizations underground can master the way to absorb special energy from the human body, and create the spirit of sacrifice and the source of God with the help of this power. So is it equally possible for humans? He looked at Yang Xinxin. "Look, even a backward civilization like Nash Kingdom that doesn't develop science has the 9-story demon tower that can gather energy. With our current human technology, it shouldn't be too difficult to do the same." Yang Xinxin looked at Zhang Yi, her pitch-black pupil flickering with a demonic light like a black gemstone. "Brother, there is indeed such a possibility. And by the time we realize that, perhaps those forces that have mastered higher powers have already started similar experiments a long time ago. Only the prerequisite for that, do you understand what it is?" Zhang Yi thought of the past. Even just at the very beginning of the arrival of the end times, the West Mountain Base in Tianhai City had already started human experimentation projects. And what about today, 2.5 years after the end times? Zhang Yi's heart was creeped out. Suppose supernatural energy is actually life energy. Then to plunder this energy, one would have to do a lot of killing. Yang Xinxin nodded. "Don't rule out such a possibility at all. Both brother and us are growing up, and are desperately trying to do everything in our power to become stronger because we need to face the unknown future. But everyone who has been able to survive to this day is likewise fighting desperately to stay alive. And they are also working hard to become stronger all the time." Zhang Yi swallowed. Even the powerful existences that I was once unable to look past are continuously getting stronger. For example, the Hades Gatekeeper. Another example was the White Dragon. The two analyzed the situation and came to the conclusion that this world was still full of dangers. However, they didn't have any solid evidence for any of this. It was just a speculation in their minds. However, once the possibility was established, they had to face it with all their might. Otherwise, there was only one outcome of guessing wrong. Sooner or later, they would be obliterated by an even more powerful existence. Even if the other party was unnecessarily Zhang Yi's enemy, but simply because of any trivial reason, they would be able to wipe Zhang Yi and the others out. Zhang Yi rubbed his brow. "It's good that we never slacked off. I've gotten enough this time that I can still create another Epsilon-level mutant out of it." And by utilizing the Earth Centipede farm, I can make the Delta-level mutants around me stronger and stronger. Or even get a troop composed entirely of Captain-level mutants one day in the future. The only regret is that we still don't know what kind of existence those powerful races that exist in the underground world are. They clearly possess sufficiently powerful forces, and why they have to survive underground. And all of this would still need to wait until after the deciphering of the information obtained by Nash Kingdom to be known. Just at this time, Zhou Qi came over to the living room and said to Zhang Yi with a smile, "The surgery is ready." "That captive, when can we do it?" Zhang Yi sniffed and tapped his head. "I almost forgot about that guy." The trip to the southwest region had yielded many rewards, including a living person. A member of the Knights of the Round Table, Green Knight Bowser. His ability index wasn't too high, he was just a Delta-level mutant. However, his ability was extremely rare, a plant-based ability and the ability to transform into a weapon. The ability of the sword in the tree could also be enhanced according to the user's level. Zhang Yi had already made up his mind to turn Bowser into a botanist without a brain and then stay around to use it. If he wanted to do so without harming the body and completely erasing its self-existence, he could only rely on Zhou Qi. Zhang Yi stood up while pulling Yang Xinxin up. "But before that, I want to figure out the status of the Knights of the Round Table as well as Britannia today." With Yang Xinxin around, of course, he wanted to milk Bowser's intelligence dry before making his move. Intelligence was one of the most important resources after the end of the world. The three of them arrived at the basement and opened a thick metal doors. Bowser was injected with Compound 3 and then tied to an alloy chair with restraints for death. Seeing the door open, Bowser slowly opened his eyes. He looked at Zhang Yi with mocking eyes. "Chaos, I will never answer any of your questions." Zhang Yi, "Huh? Did I ask you?" Bowser pushed up his chest hard. "I am an honorable Knights of the Round Table, you can kill me, but don't ever try to pry my mouth open." Zhang Yi rubbed his nose. "I won't ask then." He looked at Yang Xinxin next to him. "Yang Xinxin, you go." Yang Xinxin smiled as she raised her right hand towards Bowser, and the Angel of Desire emerged behind her, spreading its huge 6 wings. The next moment, Bowser's eyes were filled with infatuation as he looked towards Yang Xinxin. "My queen, please feel free to dominate my filthy stupid pig." Zhang Yi immediately asked Yang Xinxin to ask Bowser about the important information about the Knights of the Round Table and Britannia. Bowser knew everything and told everything he knew one by one. After listening to it, Zhang Yi's heart received quite a shock. Britannia, a powerful nation that was once called the Sunless Empire and had dominated the world for hundreds of years. Even if it was not at its peak later on, the heritage of many years still existed. One of the very important points was the cultural field. According to Bowser, long before the end came, they knew many things in the field of the occult by looting artifacts from all over the world. This also led them to know that the end would come. Moreover, from Bowser's mouth, Zhang Yi also heard a new term. Day of the Fall. This was the information that the East Brahma Company had deciphered from a stone slab found amongst an ancient temple back then, when they were colonizing Brahma. The Nakal Tablet. Yang Xinxin said softly. "I have heard of its existence before, and it is said to be over 1,000,000 years old, written in a script that does not belong to any civilization today." Chapter 1459, Squeezing Intelligence. Bowser was not a learned man, and some of the intelligence were fragments of information obtained from his mouth. However, just these fragments were already enough for Zhang Yi to start an infinite reverie. The power of the state is indeed powerful. Even though I'm already a Black Chariot-level mutant nowadays, I'm still far behind them in this regard. Zhang Yi let out this sentiment. It was only a pity that the Xinjiang region side, at the moment, was unlikely to open up this information to him. Yang Xinxin, however, said to Zhang Yi, "In this field, Huashu Kingdom should be far behind Britannia. After all, many ancient artifacts and documents have long since ceased to exist. Quite a few of them are even preserved in the Britannia Museum. Zhang Yi's eyebrows rose and he looked at Bowser with a cold smile. It looks like we can make a trip to Britannia if we have the chance and get back what belongs to us. Bowser continued to obediently answer Yang Xinxin's question. Britannia's national strength should not be underestimated. It was not a large country, but its depth was simply too deep. Due to the relatively adequate preparation, it resulted in the losses they suffered after the end of the world being within an acceptable range. Those who died were only most of the civilians that their upper echelons had intended to remove. As for the reserves of Reaper of Love, they were not even weaker than Huashu Kingdom. This old world power was now fully capable of standing in the world. Even if it was not as strong as Huashu Kingdom, it could still be ranked in the top few. Then, what about the Knights of the Round Table? The deputy captain is Lancelot, so the information of the other members of your team, tell us all. Bowser introduced the information of the other members of the Round Table. The Knights of the Round Table, there were a total of 13 members. There were only 6 who came to Snowy Plateau this time, other than that there were 7 others, namely, Head of the Order King Arthur, Arthur Pendragon, Holy Knight, Percival, Steel Knight, Kay, Sun Knight, Gawain, Knight of Morning Knight, Tristan, Violet Silver Knight, Bedivere, Loyal Knight, Gaheris. In addition, there is another powerful being in the kingdom who is not affiliated with the knights and is second only to King Arthur. Court Magician, Merlin. These people, together with the 6 from the southwest region, were the most powerful mutants in Britannia today. Zhang Yi seriously inquired, and how strong are they? Bowser replied, the overall strength of the knights of the upper 6, excluding the deputy captain Lancelot, is stronger than us. As for Merlin, he is even stronger than Lancelot. This is something I have only heard rumors about as well, because a few months ago, Lancelot had challenged Merlin, and the result ended in failure. Zhang Yi did not hear Bowser mention King Arthur and could not help but frown. Then, what about that king of yours? His strength, and at what level? A look of awe emerged on Bowser's face. The king's strength has been so powerful that I can't imagine. He has led us, and has entered the underground secret realm twice, and has successfully acquired the secret treasures underground. There was once a time when the operation was going on, Lancelot wanted to spar with the king on sword skills. As a result, the king defeated Lancelot with only one sword. Zhang Yi's gaze became deep. The strongest man in Britannia, backed by all the resources of a powerful kingdom, must be frighteningly strong. At that time, Lancelot had yet to obtain Chili Duhan's origin, and for King Arthur to be able to defeat him with a single sword, the supernatural ability index would have to reach at least 25,000 points to be able to do so without taking into account the condition of attribute restraints. While Zhang Yi was pondering how he would respond to an encounter with King Arthur one day, Bowser's next words made him freeze. King Arthur, he is the pride of our Levant family. He is my proudest brother. Bowser's expression was extraordinarily excited. Mentioning King Arthur's name was like a pilgrimage. Zhang Yi looked up at him fiercely. Oh? You are King Arthur's brother? The 12 knights of the Round Table, including King Arthur and Merlin, were naturally not so by their real names. They were all named after legendary figures, just like Zhang Yi's Chaos, codename. Bowser nodded his head and stated that both he and King Arthur were from the Levant family. No wonder, no wonder. Zhang Yi thought of the strange look in Lancelot's eyes when he insisted on taking Bowser away and instantly understood what he meant at that time. Shokir asked gently, since his brother is the strongest person in Britannia, should we send him back? After all, messing with such a character might be troublesome in the future. According to Zhang Yi's character in the past, he would easily not mess with someone he was not sure of dealing with. However, this time, Zhang Yi shook his head without the slightest hesitation. No, I won't send this fellow back. Shokir looked at Zhang Yi with some surprise. Zhang Yi looked at Bowser with a calm gaze and said, this time, it's the guys from Britannia who ran into Huashu Kingdom's territory. If I return the people, I will lose not only my own face, but also the face of my old ancestors. Bowser looked at Zhang Yi with a mournful expression. Shou Qi and Yang Xinxin both nodded in agreement. There were some things that could not be conceded, this was the basic principle. The last question was what secret realms had been discovered in Britannia. Separated by half a planet, what happened in Europe was not something Zhang Yi could understand. Bowser replied, "We discovered the ruins of Atlantis and were personally led by the king, having participated in the investigation of the Notre Dame de Paris corpse cave." And the results? Bowser sighed, the current power of mankind is still too small in the face of those unknown existences. He also confessed that the Nash Kingdom under the southwest region was the weakest underground civilization he had ever encountered. Even with a terrifying existence like Prince Amlet, it was still able to show them a glimmer of hope of victory. In the previous 2 times, they, including King Arthur, had almost fallen in it. That feeling of powerless despair was something he wanted to experience a second time in his life. But those 2 near deaths had also allowed them to receive considerable rewards, including the Source of God. The Source of God. Underground civilization doesn't seem to care much about this kind of thing. The Nash Kingdom even uses it as a decoration. It's impossible for them not to feel the special power contained within it. Is there a reason for doing so? Zhang Yi curiously muttered to himself. Bowser's mouth could not squeeze any more useful information out of it. Zhang Yi waved his hand towards Shou Qi, "Operate on him. All I need is a human-sized sword." Shou Qi smiled and nodded. "I guarantee that I will make him maintain his normal physiological activities other than losing his self-mind. Even, it is possible to raise the supernatural level as in the past. In that case, your weapon can also keep getting stronger." Chapter 1460 Fate is hard to beat. Bowser was terrified after hearing Zhang Yi's plan. He hurriedly opened his mouth to beg for mercy. Don't kill me, I'm actually very obedient, I can follow you in the future. Big brother, give a chance." Zhang Yi shook his head, "Forget it, I don't know you very well either. You'd better go die a death." He then ignored Bowser's miserable wails before personally giving him a shot to quiet him down. In order to make sure that nothing happened in between, Zhang Yi called out Uncle Yu to help watch and help Shou Qi complete the surgery. Less than half a day later, Shou Qi brought the living dead man with only a body left to him. Bowser was dead, his body was still alive, and at this moment, he turned into a true and genuine vegetable. Shou Qi said to Zhang Yi with a smile, "Just need to control his brain nerves through electric current, his body can still react like a normal person. The disadvantage is that he needs to defecate, but this can also be solved by injecting nutrient solution." Zhang Yi nodded and directly asked Mu Yan to put Bowser into shadow space. Although it was already brain dead, it was still impossible to include it in dimensional space, and Zhang Yi vaguely felt out a little bit of the rules of this determination. The factor that determined whether or not it could be actively stored was probably related to supernatural energy, or human energy. After that, there was still a very important thing that needed to be done. Everyone knew that Zhang Yi had gotten more than one copy of the Source of God from Nash Kingdom. Although he didn't say it on his lips, everyone wanted to get it though. After all, the near-godlike power that they had obtained after being promoted to Epsilon had long since mesmerized them deeply. It was just that none of them were the first to open their mouths. Everyone knew in their hearts that Zhang Yi knew who was the most suitable person to obtain it. According to the current situation, there was no doubt that Liang Yu, as the second martial arts faction under Zhang Yi, was the most qualified to obtain the Source of God. Zhang Yi was indeed like that as well. After pondering for a long time, he ended up choosing Liang Yu between Liang Yu and Liu Karen. Liu Karen's current supernatural ability index had yet to reach 9,900 points, so even if she was given the Source of God, it would be a long time before she slowly broke through. Liang Yu was different, she was now in a state of limitation, plus her own degree of development was already extremely high. As long as she was given a chance, she would break through Epsilon very quickly. In this way, It wouldn't be long before Zhang Yi's personal team would have 3 epsilon-level mutants amongst them. This was a very exaggerated number, and if it was spread out, it was feared that there was no one in the world who wouldn't be red-eyed. Although at the moment, quantitative changes could not trigger qualitative changes, the newly promoted flower plus the quasi-epsilon Liangyu, combined, were not as powerful as an 18,000 plus white chariot. But the most crucial thing was a future. As long as they lived, as long as they kept fighting, they could keep getting stronger. As for the remaining 1/3, he did not waste it, but gave it to Lu Karen. The two received the source of God that Zhang Yi had given them, and their eyes were filled with excitement. Liang Yu didn't say much, but just left with a determined gaze to absorb the energy of the source of God, so that she could break through the limitations of the genetic lock as soon as possible. Lu Karen was sobbing because she was too excited. "Brother, this thing is too valuable. I am so worried that I don't deserve it." Zhang Yi said to Lu Karen, "Although you haven't directly participated in battles, each of us can't live without you. The weapons you made, the armor you built, and the intelligent equipment you developed have all helped us tremendously along the way. That's why everyone hopes that you can become even more powerful. It's good for every one of us." Lu Karen gripped the fragment of the source of God in his hand and nodded vigorously to Zhang Yi. "Brother, I will definitely not let you down." Looking at the back of the girl and the woman as they left, Zhang Yi thought of something, but after some slight thought, he still didn't say it. Perhaps not everyone is in my situation either. He turned his back and looked out the window at the heavy snow that was still falling, and subconsciously reached out and rubbed his temples hard. He had become stronger, and after he promoted Black Chariot, Lai's origin power was slowly being absorbed by him. According to his calculations, by the time he completely absorbed Lai's power cleanly, his supernatural ability index would probably reach 22,000 points. This was a number that made him very excited. However, what came along with it was that the kind of dream ravings became clearer and clearer. He slowly began to be able to accept this strange situation. The voice in his sleep, he could not understand what it was, but just felt exceptionally intimate. It's as if a loved one is gently telling an ancient story in his ear. Xingjing. This is an extremely dark location, seems to be a cold and dry cave. There is no wind, but from time to time there is a low breathing sound coming from the end, as if thunder. Lights suddenly lit up in the distance, and 2 figures slowly walked towards the side. In the middle of the darkness, a huge sharp claw slowly retracted. Just a momentary flash, it made people feel the cold and solid texture of black iron. The monster opened its eyes, revealing a pair of scarlet eyes that unexpectedly did not have much of a killing intent, but instead carried a touch of boredom, as if it was impatient with the visitor. The 2 men slowly approached, but the light simply didn't seem to melt into the darkness where the monster was, blocked by something, as if they didn't want to be spied on. 2 people stood there, a man and a woman, one tall and one short. The man carried a lamp in his hand and stood aside as the woman in the black cloak looked into the darkness and spoke slowly. "The signs of the underground are becoming more and more obvious. How much time do we have?" The monster looked at her lazily, and shortly afterwards spoke slowly, surprisingly in human speech. "Time is running out. This is a cycle, and soon it will be your generation's turn." The woman furrowed her brows and continued to press on undeterred. "Is there no possibility of circumvention?" A snort escaped from the monster's mouth. For endless years, how many generations of humans have wanted to make such an attempt? But in the end, without exception, they all failed. You must remember that the enemy you will face is an unimaginable existence. You don't even have the qualifications to meet him, so how can you talk about fighting him? The woman was silent for a long time this time. Although she had already guessed such an answer in her heart, she was still unwilling to accept this cruel reality. She suddenly raised her head and looked straight into the darkness. "Even the most powerful god of your tribe has never seen him? The one you speak of, Kagago."